Okay, so welcome again to the Avodas HaParsha Shir in beautiful Lev Avram, Shari Chesed Yerushalayim. Tonight's shir is sponsored in memory of Lev ben Chayena Dina, who was Andrew Ansel Forsyth, the son of Mrs. Jane Ansel, and brother of Rabbi Isaac Ansel Forsyth, who both listened to the shir. And every year on his yahrzeit, his brother has a bit of a gathering. I've often gone and spoken there, and I'm not there tonight because of this, but thinking about him inspired me a little bit to bring in a topic that was above and beyond what I was going to mention in the beginning. So we'll try to do both. We have in the Parsha the idea of digging the wells. A lot of Torah about digging the wells, the Plishtim covering the wells, right? The wells that Avram Avinu dug, that Yitzchak redug, and finally, eventually, the wells that Yitzchak was able to dig and nobody bothered him. So there are many Mefarshim explaining what those things represent. Right? Many explain that this is really a sign, it's Maisa Avos Siman Labonim, right? That's meaning what the Avos did kind of laid the groundwork for future history, right? Ada Yom Hazeh, correct, these things we see. So, like Rav Hirsch goes through it, and he sees, the progression. Like he says that Yitzchak first, Avimelech says, nobody should touch this person, and he can live wherever he wants. And then Yitzchak profits greatly. Yitzchak Hashem. Now, Rav Hirsch has a fascinating explanation of this Mea Sha'arim. Right? He said like this. He said, Mea Sha'arim really means Mea Shvokim, 100 marketplaces, meaning that Yitzchak distributed his produce to 100 marketplaces. Rather than holding on to it and keeping the price up, he actually sold all of his inventory, keeping the price down, benefiting all the people. Right? He says many times a person who has, I once read an article about how De Beers in South Africa, how they decide how to release the diamonds. They don't put out everything they have. They keep an eye to keep the price. Same thing with the oil from our neighbors here. And then it says, Vayigdal ha'ish, right? It says, once again, Yitzchak got even bigger. And suddenly he's not called Yitzchak, he's called Aish. Rav Hirsch said this is from the perspective of the Plishtim, right? They said there's this person who's getting very big here, and they didn't like that. And it says, Vayikanu oso Plishtim. And the Plishtim were jealous of him, but Rav Hirsch, again, with his knowledge of the dikduk and the words, says usually we'll say Vayikane bo, right, in terms of being jealous. What does it mean, Vayikane oso? That means they didn't want him to exist. It wasn't just, they were jealous of what he had. They didn't want him. They were jealous of his very existence. And this, again, happened throughout Jewish history, right? But Yitzchak eventually, right, manages to find his place. He says, actually, when he leaves them, and he finds his own independent place. He goes to Beersheba, where Avram Avinu had his place, and he makes a mizbeach. He says, by leaving them on the side, by sticking to the roots of where he comes from, suddenly everything went well for Yitzchak. And suddenly HaKadosh Baruch Hu appears to him in a very special way. Now, Chazal say that the Golus started with Yitzchak. Okay, this is one of these things we say in school. I have to admit, I never quite understood it till this night, or maybe I didn't forgot it, right? We say that really Hashem told Avram Avinu, Geri Azaracha Be'etzolahem v'avodum v'inu osam arba meos shana. They're going to be enslaved for 400 years. But we say they were only actually in slavery in Mitzrayim for 210 years. Kiminyan Redu. So they say, how's that work? It says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu cheshboned from Yitzchak Avinu. Right? Why Yitzchak? Because Yitzchak is the one here who's starting to suffer the tzaros of Golus. Here we see the template of Yitzchak minding his own business, benefiting the countries around him, and yet they want to throw him out. Okay, now he said also, like all countries that threw out the Jews, they end up realizing that they lose from it. And that's where we have Avimelech coming back afterwards, right? And after they told him, Lech me'imonu, ki atzamta mimenu me'od, right? Go away from us because you've become much too mighty for us. Now he comes to him and he says, right, that he wants to make, again, after all the fights over the wells, Avimelech halach elav migror v'achuzas me're'eu. Avimelech goes with a group of his friends, colleagues, and Yitzchak says the truth. He says, V'adu abosim elai, v'atem sneisem osi v'atshalchuni meitchem. Why'd you come to me? You hated me. You chased me out. And they said, V'o ra'inu ka'ya Hashem imcha. Right? We saw that Hashem is with you. Right? And v'nomer tihina Allah beinosenu beinenu beinecha v'nichu sabris imach. We want to make this covenant with us, a covenant with an Allah, like with a real oath that'll be powerful. What are the contents of this? Imtase imanu ra'a, kasher lo nega'anucha. If you will do something bad to us after we have not touched you, v'kasher asinu imcha rak tov, and after we have only done good to you, v'anashalechecha b'shalom, as you see, we sent you in peace, right? Ata baruch Hashem, right? You are the blessed one of Hashem, and Yitzchak actually makes a suda for them. Now the Netziv, in his introduction to Sefer Bereshis, explains why Bereshis is called Sefer HaYoshar, and he explains it's because of the yashrus of the Avos, of their straightness, of their behavior with the people around them. He said, including non-Jews, including idolaters. And one of the examples he gives is how Yitzchak, right, who had all the righteous claims in the world, all the reason to be angry with Avimelech and the Plishtim, made up with them very quickly and easily. Right? That's an example of it which is there. But now we get to Rabbi Levi Yitzchak and Berditchov, who tries to explain this whole rigmarole that they said to him. Right? They said, if you will do something bad to us, when we didn't touch you, right, and we didn't harm you, and we sent you in peace, what was this? I mean, they basically banished him, right, after giving him tzaros and filling in his wells and doing all these things. So Rabbi Yitzchak explains the way that they worked. He says, the Baal HaTurim says that Avimelech really wanted to harm Yitzchak, okay, but Hashem turned it into good, right, in the same way, right, that he did like with Bilam. So, and same thing with Lavan. When Lavan chased after Yaakov Avinu and he was going to harm him, Hashem came to him and said, don't touch him. So here too, Avimelech is coming, saying, right, Avimelech said, Imtase imanu ra'a, meaning, right, we wanted to do bad to you. Now, if you want to do bad to us, so he says, Ka'asher lo nega'anucha, we didn't touch you. Why didn't we touch you? Because Hashem didn't let us. Right? We saw, yeah. So he says, since HaKadosh Baruch Hu's midah is lehetiv, so he says, therefore, he says, you should know that even if you try to do evil to us in an unjust way, Hashem's just going to turn that into a tova. Because we see that's the midah of Hashem, so you might as well be good to us from the get-go. That's just interesting. He says, v'havin, it's a little tricky. But now the next piece we want to focus on. Avimelech said that Yitzchak should do tov to him because Avimelech was good to Yitzchak. And he didn't touch him l'ra'ah. Now he says, wait a second, Yitzchak shouldn't owe Avimelech anything, right? The only reason he didn't harm Yitzchak was because HaKadosh Baruch Hu prevented him, right? And if Avimelech would have tried to harm Yitzchak, he would have been harmed. He says, as you see, what happened to the people that tried to harm the Avos, right? They all got into trouble. He says, so what is the good that Avimelech felt that he did to Yitzchak? He said, you know what? If I would have harmed you, so I see the way your God works, and you're the Baruch Hashem, you're the blessed of God, he would have destroyed me. And I know that tzaddikim don't like anything to be destroyed, because they're like their creator, right? He says, so if people do good to tzaddikim, so then they get bracha. Right? He says, So there, and tzaddikim like that. They like people to be blessed through them. So this is what Avimelech says, right? We've done to you just tov, meaning you should do tov for us because we didn't bring about the situation that we would have had to be punished through you, right? And therefore he says you get nachas from the good that we get instead of the bad, because you are the Baruch Hashem. Okay, so he says, Kain darchem shel tzadikim. This is the way of tzadikim, that they don't want ra'a milamala lahani shum adam b'sibasel. They don't even want others to be punished because of them from above. Okay, he says, that was the tova that he did for him. Okay, now this is a very tricky topic. They bring here in the footnotes that Rav Yonasan Eibshitz has a long arichos about this in the Rav Yonasan Eibshitz Sefer. Why am I forgetting again? Should be here. Anyway, Rav Yonasan Eibshitz in his famous Sefer of Drashos, whose name escapes me for the second. Right, so he speaks about different Gemaras where it seems to be otherwise. Yaros Dvash, right? Yaros Dvash by Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz. So he speaks about different stories in the Gemara where it seems that people were punished through tzaddikim and that was how it was supposed to be, so to speak. But he says all those can be answered. The basic principle is one that we learned in Sefer Yonah, right? When Yonah was upset that Nineveh wasn't destroyed, HaKadosh Baruch Hu had the gourd grow over him, and then the worm ate the gourd. He was very upset. Right? You are upset about this one gourd that you didn't plant. You didn't do anything for it. You didn't grow it. It was here one night. It was gone the next. I shouldn't have mercy on the great city of Nineveh. More than 120,000 people. These people who don't know from one to the other, one hand to the other, and even the animals that are there. So, right, here's the Yaros Dvash. He says the tzaddikim, their derech is to do good. He says that's why Moshe Rabbeinu and other tzaddikim loved teaching, because the nature of one who is good is to do good. He says, and also you find in Chazal stories of tzaddikim in Olam Haba, who come back to this world to teach Torah, right? He says, why are they doing that? He says the Zohar Kodesh brings it many places. Everybody knows the Masorah that the Baal Shem Tov learned from Achia Hashiloni. He says, Ki cheptzam lelamed Torah. He said they want to teach Torah. It's a greater simcha for them to do good for others more than experiencing Olam Haba. Okay, and they don't want others to be punished for them. Okay, so this is a picture of who and what a tzaddik is. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want to destroy his creations. Right? There are times in which evil has to be destroyed. Right? That's why it says that Yam Suf, he told the Malachim, Masa Yodai Tovim Bayam Ba'atem Omrim Shira. It says the Malachim wanted to sing, and he said, I made those Mitzrim. Right? I made them. They're drowning. They have to be drowned. But don't sing. Interestingly, and just give a clip of it, Rebbe Meir Bloch, Tzal had a whole explanation. Why is it then that Am Yisrael could sing Oz Yoshir? Right? It was a very grisly scenario if you read the Pshat and the Psukim. Vayar Yisrael Mitzrayim Meisal Svasayam, and there Oz Yoshir Moshe B'nai Israel. He said that's the difference between a human being and a malach. He says a malach can only be in one mode, celebration or mourning. A human being has the ability to feel sad that Hashem's creations had to be destroyed, and still to be able to sing for the Yeshua. Right?
Hashem did say, Yadi Tovim B'yam.
Yeah.
That
That he said to the Malachim. But Am Yisrael were criticized. Those Yosher is one of our great things. Okay, so this was the part from the Kedushas Levi that I wanted to bring, and it's a very big key. I'll just mention something a little poignant from a verse before we go on to Hashem Shmuel. Rav Hirsch explains that there are three stages that we see in our Parsha of the relationship of Jews among the nations. And we find that the Torah says that in the end of days, there'll be this kind of backwards progression. Zacharti is brisi Yaakov. Hashem, I'll remember my bris with Yaakov. V'afes brisi Yitzchak, v'afes brisi Avram ezkor v'aretz ezkor. So he says, what are these three? He says, Yaakov Avinu, his status was the one who suffered among the nations. He went out into Golus, he went out with Lavan, he went out, he was there, and he suffered. And this is where I said it like it's kind of poignant, because he says, he says that the bris of Yaakov is the ability to stand and withstand the terrible nisyonos and mitzukos, right, and the troubles and the crises. And he says, Shlav ze nimtza kvar ulai me'acharenu. He said, it could be that this stage is already behind us. The stage of, again, where he was sitting in Germany at that time, and Jews were being given all these rights and things like that, and you were an equal citizen in Germany, etc. He thought maybe it's a sign that we're past that. Yeah. Unfortunately, that definitely was not true. Right? Yitzchak is the ability to go independently, proud of your heritage, right, among the nations, even if they're not oppressing you, treating you as an equal, you remain proud of your identity, and even if they're jealous and everything, you withstand it. Eventually, we'll have the status of Avram Avinu, where they said, Nesi Elokim ata b'sochenu. You are the Prince of God among us. And that will be eventually that the nations will come to recognize Am Yisrael. Okay, so now I just want to look into the essence of the Be'eros themselves. What's happening? In other words, the Avos did lots of things. The Avos ate breakfast, right? The Avos harvested, the Avos planted. The Torah does not give us day-to-day accounts of what they did. That's not the purpose of the Torah. Just like in the Nevi'im, right, when they tell us about the Malachim, everything we see in the Malachim is something that we are supposed to learn from forever. And they always finish the history of a particular king, right, and this king and all of his wars and all his deeds and all of this, Haloim Ksuvim al Sefer Divrei Hayomim Malchei Yehuda, right, meaning there's another book that the Sofer HaMelech would write. That was the history book of his kingdom. That's where it's got all of the different things. He made this tax, that tax. If it doesn't have to do with the eternity of the Jewish people, it's not part of Tanakh. These Be'eros that were here, right, must have something very eternal for us if the Torah wrote them in great detail. So Shem Shmuel explains like this. He says, and this is where Andrew came to mind when I saw this. He says like this. The idea of digging a well, so he said, my father, the Avnei Nezer, who was the son-in-law of the Kotzker Rebbe, said it can be explained by the Chovos HaLevavos' explanation of a pasuk in Mishlei. The pasuk in Mishlei, right, and that pasuk is, I pulled out the Mishlei so we have it, Perek Chof pasuk Hey, Mayim amukim etza belev ish, ve'ish tvuno yidleno. He said, etza belev ish, the understanding, the knowledge of what to do, right, the guidance is deep waters that are in the heart of a man. The ish tvuna, a person of understanding, yidlena, will know how to draw that up from the depths. Right? Yidlena, a dili is a bucket. Right? Yidli aromimcha Hashem ki dili soni, that you raised me up from the depths. So the image of a well means, this says the Chovos HaLevavos, that just like there's deep water running underground, right? He says, what you need to do to get to that water is to take away the earth that's blocking it. Okay, but it's there, it's running there. He says, so too, the Eitzah in the heart of a person is there, meaning a person's true understanding, a person's true connection, a person's true character and his emotions and feelings, the legitimate ones that really should be there, they're all there. Just you have to take off this covering, this insulation, which is there, that doesn't let you connect with it. It says, because everybody should be on fire with love for Hashem, with wanting to follow Hashem. He says, but because the eyes of our heart are covered from the physicality of the world, it's like a type of screen that darkens things and doesn't let us see what he calls the inyan ha'eloki, godliness with our eyes. So he says, what were the Avos doing by digging wells? They were giving us the ability. Right? Rav Dessler has a beautiful parish of the phrase Zchus Avos. He said, Zchus comes from the word like Zach, pure. He said, or essence. Shemen Zayit Zach. So he says it's the Zakut of the Avos. It's something that the Avos put in our spiritual DNA. That's the idea of Zchus Avos. It's not brownie points. Meaning, when Avram Avinu did his Mesiras Nefesh with the Akedah, that became part of us and who we are. Huh? Zach, no, Shemen Zayit Zach. I think Chaf says it. We can look. He can ask his phone how we spell it, but we'll as far as that, I believe so. Okay, so he says, therefore, what the Avos did are putting something in our spiritual DNA, which gives us an ability we can unlock. So we have the ability to break through that screen and to actually be able to see godliness in this world, right? That's what they're teaching us by digging up and bringing out the Mayim Chayim. What you're revealing is not dead, stagnant water. What you're revealing is living, fresh, flowing water. Now he says the Ramban said that the wells paralleled the Batei Mikdash, right? The idea of the wells being dug, covered up, redug. So you have Bayis Rishon, Bayis Sheni, and then the Bayis Shlishi. Okay, he says, he will add to the Ramban the following. Anything which is new is exciting, but it won't stay exciting for very long as it goes on. That's human nature. He says if you are exposed to something regularly, even if it's something that gets you worked up in the beginning, it's not going to continue like that. He gives the example of what Rashi says about Hagar, right? Hagar sees a malach. She's talking to the malachim, right? It says why? Rashi says because she was used to seeing malachim in Avram Avinu's house. So then in the midbar, 4 malachim came to talk to her, one after the other, and she's like, hi. Right? No particular, whereas we find the example of Manoach, Shimshon's father, he saw a malach and he came to tell his wife, we're going to die. Right? I saw a malach, I'm going to die. Right? But you get used to it, right? So then it's like that. So he says, that's why the Avos were worried that once Judaism becomes something generation to generation to generation, and people are growing up in it, and we're already, seeing the Sufganiyot coming out for Hanukkah, we're going to like the thing most, or play the dreidel, give the money, etc., next, and it just starts to be robotic, monkey see, monkey do, and people don't get worked up about it. So therefore, they did what's called a poel dimyoni. They did a physical action, but with the kavanah to create a spiritual reality, that we would be able to dig through that blockage, right? And enable us to have feeling and feel the newness of what we're doing. And it will be precious to us just like in the beginning. So he says, from these wells we get 2 things. One is that you'll be able to break through that barrier, right? Until you'll be able to see godliness even in this world. And he said, and that will bring a person to actually feel and become emotional and enthusiastic about his Avodas Hashem. But also, it's not just water that comes out, but it's ever running, refreshing, new water, that it won't get old and it won't get stale. Okay, he says, what stops us so often from being able to feel in Ruchnius is the needs of our body. Right? In other words, the needs of our body doesn't just mean basics like oxygen and food and drink. If you look at what we're involved in and worried about and concerned about so much, everything from earning our money to doing our things, it's really our physical needs that come with a lot of tirdos. Tirdos are burdens and distractions that weigh down our mind. Okay? And that causes us to wander. He says, he'll apply to that the pasuk in Tehillim, Ta'isi keseh oved bakesh avdecha. Hashem, I've wandered away like a lost sheep. Seek me out. Right? Meaning, it's hard for me to get back. Okay, so that's what these wells are supposed to enable us to do. So, I was just thinking, this young man Andrew's 60th birthday is tonight, so he was born with a variety of what the world calls disabilities. Right? There are things he wasn't able to do. There were physical things. There were other aspects of it which were there. But from what I've heard, especially over the years from his family, is he really had joy every day of life. Right? We aren't able to have joy in a day of life because we're always thinking about our problems, either the problems that were, the problems that are, the problems that will be. Right? It's always there. What I need, what I don't have, what I'm afraid of, what I'm, all these things. That's one thing that gets us. That's what he calls the tirdos of the physicality. Right? It can be there in everything. I saw a cute story once. There was a Rav who lived in Pittsburgh. This is in the 1940s, 50s. And he wrote a sefer. Now it's interesting, when you look at Sfarim, especially in America from those days, who were they writing for? Right? Oftentimes they were writing to send them to other Rabbanim, right? Who would be, the yeshivas were just starting up. There was someone would be there. So he sent the sefer to Ruderman, the Rosh Yeshiva of Ner Yisrael in Baltimore. And, right. So he sent his sefer, and Rav Ruderman sent him the sefer that he wrote, Avodas HaLevi. And this Rav from Pittsburgh sent him what in those days was a very large check, like $50 or something. So at some point they met, and Rav Ruderman said, why did you send so much money? He says, listen, I got older and the shul was worried about what's going to be with me. So they said they're going to start a retirement fund. And they made this whole pension fund, and they invested it in stocks and different things. They explained to me how it works. He said, and suddenly I keep finding myself thinking about it and looking in the paper what's happening with this stock and what's happening with this. He says, so I'm trying to get rid of it as quickly as possible. So when somebody sends me a sefer, I send them $50 and gets. So this is the idea of the tirdas that are there, the burdens and distractions. That's one thing that give us a hard time. And also the fact that days aren't fresh to us, meaning something that I'm doing now, I did it so many times before. I'm probably going to do it so many times in the future. I can't focus on what I'm doing now. On Zeh Yom Asa Hashem Nagilo V'nismecha Bo. And this young man had that ability, not only to do that, but in fact, like I said, he had a particular sensitivity. When someone fell down, he knew to come and just try to get them to laugh. He loved laughing, and he was able to do that. It wasn't autism. I don't know exactly what it was, but yeah, it could be. It was both physical and mental. But that was something which is there. So there's a lot to learn from that. Sometimes the more we simplify, the more we're able to dig away the dirt that's blocking the well, and we're able to taste the waters that are there. So we have that ability. The Avos put us into it. That's what's there in the Be'eros. We just have to try to walk in their footsteps and to dig in the right way and to know, though, that the water is there. To know that it's there and we can reach it. Yeah, sure.
What's the connection between Yitzchak Avinu's wells and Be'er Lachai Roe, which last week we learned he had a big part in?
Right. Even though that was the one that Hagar brought about.
Right.
Yes.
Is there any connection there?
Again, all these things are wells. There, what I saw in this story was that Hagar, so to speak, dug open something very deep with her very deeply felt tefillah. And that's why Yitzchak went to tap into that power. That was, tefillah also is, right, Eshpoch lefanav sichi. Tefillah is described a lot as liquid, as water, as from shifchi kamayim libech, right, all these psukim. So she was able to open up a well in some way with that.
Well, they're trying to tell us what the message is to us. They really dug wells.
Correct.
Really
Correct.
What can we see? But why the Torah being told? Because we have learned things from it.
Right.
It's not that that's what the Torah means.
Correct. In other words, the pshat. I saw a story about the Brisker Rav. Somebody told him a Hasidic pshat about something, and he said, "I'm not such a Hasid as to say that that's the pshat in the pasuk, but the point," he said, is a very valid point. Right. So 100% these things. But the very fact that the Torah told us, and the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put them in this physical world where they had to dig wells to get water for their sheep, right, is that which brought them to do something, but their kavanah, the way they did things, they knew that they were laying forward Jewish history. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov knew that they were building this nation.
And then Yaakov meeting at the well.
Correct. Right? Also.
They needed water.
Huh? Yeah.
They needed water. We had Yisrael, we had 2 wells that were dug hundreds of years ago.
And they still were
The
working.
water there, you can't, the water is not good for farming. It's very high sodium content. But the point that a well and there's rocks around them and everything else.
Yeah. No, 100%. That was the reality, and it was an extremely important thing. And that's also why you see that persecution of Yitzchak when they came and they stopped up his wells. That was pure persecution, because if he can't get water, nobody can get water.
But they needed also.
Correct.
Like Gush Katif, same right. We left them watering systems
And they destroyed it.
and irrigation, and we gave left
Yeah.
They destroyed it.
Right.
They used it. The same workers that they were working with them in those days.
Right, they knew how it worked. They built it. Yeah. So that's why, that's what the Mepharshim say. It was a picture of pure hatred which was there. It wasn't, economic competition. Okay, may we reach the stage of the peaceful wells, Rechovot.